Right, so there's two base ground baits, and I call them base ground baits because they are literally so versatile for all my commercial fishing and even natural fishing: marine halibut and green swim stim. Now, especially with feeder fishing, you want a ground bait with body, some density. And the beauty about marine halibut, it is ground marine halibut pellets. You cannot get a ground bait that's heavier and denser, more inert than this. So that is what I'd class as my footprint for all my ground bait mixers. I've used it for years. I come up with the idea when I've been with Dynamite for over 20 years now, and when I first joined them, of course, I was going through all the bags, trying all different mixers, and that by far with green swim stim was just like on a different level. The only thing I do add differently sometimes is I add a little bit of black swim stim. Let's say, for example, it's coming, let's say now at this time of the year where the natural organisms such as the algae hasn't really taken place because water temperature is still a bit too cold for everything to start kicking in. I like to darken my mix off so my bait ends up being more like a camouflage for the fish. So I'll use this same mix and I'll just add a little bit of black swim stim to darken it off, and it ends up looking more like, you know, like a Ringer's dark mix, something a bit darker, and I think that makes a big difference when the water's clear. But as a basic guideline, if you stick to these two ground baits for your method feeder work, your margin work, and for my natural fishing, I absolutely love these mixers, especially for skimmers, because it's a heavy mix, and I'd class it as a manageable mix. It allows me to add a little bit more water, make it into a mushy ground bait for putting through a window feeder if I need to create that cloud. But it's just got all the properties and works how I want it to work, and you'll see what I mean when I put actually the ground bait in the tank with the feeder. So generally 50-50 as a basic guideline. Green swim stim, again, let me just add a little bit more of this, a little bit of marine halibut, always the same quantities, 50-50. You can alter it if you want, but I just like to stick to 50-50. Of course, green swim stim, we all know what it is, but I love the colour of it. And as I've already explained, it bodes so well with the majority of commercials, the colour of the commercials, especially during the summertime. So I always like to turn my ground bait into more of a camouflage ground bait. So, again, 50-50. Give it a mix up. Now the key thing is with this is add the right amount of water at the start. One thing I never do on a commercial is I never use a drill. And the reason behind that is all these lakes work off the same water table through the land. The land is moist. What I don't want to be doing, and it's the same, bankside management, I can't stress how important it is. When you get to your peg, get everything organised, so when you actually start fishing, the last thing you want to be doing is getting off your box. That will massively speed up that process of fish coming down the edge and feeling safe. We are human beings, and let me tell you this, every part of nature wants to back away from us, but gradually they get used to us. If we're sat there nice and quiet, and gradually they start moving closer and closer, and they get used to our presence. Exactly the same with fish. The angler that understands this principle, less movement, less vibration on the bank, his edge lines, his short lines will come alive a lot quicker, because I don't believe it's shadowing where you've got somebody stood behind you that puts fish off. It's the movement of people walking along the bankside that massively makes a difference. The less noise you make, the quicker everything happens, which means you're going to catch more fish. And of course, on your short and your edge lines, that's where you're going to catch your bigger fish, your match-winning fish. The quicker that happens, the more weight you're going to weigh in. So I never use a drill on the bank. So when it comes to ground bait, you can mix it the night before, but I always find that's good for cereal-based mixes. We're talking about fish meal-based mixes here. I always like to mix it on the bank because generally I'm using it for a feeder, using it for fishing down the margin, and you'll actually find that it's a heavier mix if you mix it actually on the bank. If you mix it the day before, it's almost as if the ground bait is allowed too much time to absorb the moisture, and even the heaviest of ground baits become softer and fluffier. So always I prefer to mix it in the morning. Now the key is, like I said to you, add the right amount of water. Now the key is over wetting your ground bait. I can't stress how important that is. So I want to create a ground bait on the verge of being clumpy. Right, that's going clumpy. That, can you see how it's going clumpy? Really, really stodgy. Now that is over-wetted. Yeah, you see that? Really nice and clumpy. What people make a mistake of is when they're mixing ground bait, they'll add a bit of water, do a bit of prep, come back, add a bit of water, do a bit of prep, add the right amount of water at the beginning, exactly the same as the pellets. You want one hit of water, but the right amount to ensure that those pellets are absorbing all that moisture. Then you end up with a mix that is consistent throughout the whole of the match period. Right, generally I would leave that for 10 minutes, but I'll show you a way of speeding up that process. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to aerate the ground bait. So I'm just going to pass that around, just feel how clumpy it is, and I'll show you. Really clumpy, it's what you want. But you won't believe the difference in literally a minute, what I'll do to it.
I feel how heavy that is as well when you roll it.
Yeah, it's dense. But now the interesting thing is when you're fishing a feeder, especially a flatbed, it adds weight to that feeder. But that's where this tutorial is really important regarding choosing the right weight feeder to use. Because if you use a feeder that's too light, as regards to let's say a 15-gram feeder, the bait weighs more than the feeder. I've weighed all the bait when it's on a feeder, and on a 15-gram feeder, the bait weighs more. So what's going to hit the water first? The bait. So that's why your feeder choice is really important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to aerate that. So it's the same as doing a pastry or anything like that. I'm adding air into the mix, and it completely transforms. It's the same as using a drill, but I don't want to make that noise on the bank. Right, pass that around now. Completely different. Completely different.
That's just through adding air.
That's aerating. That's all you're doing. Fluffy. Whereas most people, I'm sure you'd have been sat there looking at that thing thinking, he's added too much water to that. Yeah. But you have to add too much water in order to get the best out of the particles.
That feels as though it's sort of been through a riddle already, doesn't it?
That's right. Right, so the next step is to riddle it. Now, we all know about riddling. It's to get rid of lumps. No, it's not. It's again to add air into the mix. Not bothered about the lumps. So, first riddle goes normal. Push everything through because those lumps contain that excess moisture. Aerate it again. And then riddle it from a height. So if you riddle it from a height, what you're doing? You're adding even more air into it. Push that through. Now have a look at that. Air is the most important factor to getting your ground baits right. Now the next step is how do you retain that texture? And this is really important. Yeah, but it's so simple. Minutes, literally minutes, if you manage your bait properly.
That's how it break down quicker as well.
What's that? That's right, yeah. Or the other way around, you know, and I'll show that with the feeder. So I don't want my bait to break down quickly, but I want to manage it. It allows me to do one or the other. Right, so that's the bait prep. Now, if I want to retain that texture, don't do it that much now, but when I used to do a lot of method work and, you know, dominate it with the method feeder, a flatbed and ground bait, fishing's changed a little bit now. I might use 4 or 5 of them full to the brim, compressed ground bait in them in a 5-hour match through a little feeder. So we're talking over 300 casts all the time, a lot of bait. So in the middle of the match, when I start and I want to start topping up my bait, my micros or my ground bait and both, I want to get my ground bait out. I don't want to add anything to it as regards to moisture. I want to be adding it to my bait and carrying on fishing. I want the same consistency because let me tell you, if you don't pay attention to detail with these kind of principles, You could be in the middle of the match catching a load of fish, you get your mix out, it's dried out, and all of a sudden your catch rate goes down because your bait is breaking away from the feeder too quickly. Does that make sense? At the end of the day, a method feeder is an aggravated feeding pattern. And what I mean by that is the fish come up to your feeder, and ideally you don't want all your bait released from your feeder. You want to piss the fish off. Therefore, they're going to take your hook bait quicker. Yeah? So this goes into a bait tub like that. Most people just leave it like that. What I do is press it all down like that. Now what's going to happen now with this ground bait? Exactly. So no matter how long I leave that bait for now, it's going to retain the same texture because air can't get into it now because I've compressed it right down into the bait tub. Let's say an hour later, I need that out, straight into a bucket, give it a good shake. That's right, yeah. And it's easier to transport and pack away in your bait bags, you know what I mean? But I don't think, all I do is I put it on there and then I'll get another one and put it on top. There you go, all back to normal. Yeah? So simple. So that's the ground bait. So we've done pellets and ground bait. Let me get a tub of water and we'll go do some water demos now.